Pain makes people angry. They demand change through their rage. And maybe we all thought the only way to get change was to demand it, to protest and riot in the streets, to burn it down to nothing. But where has all the fighting gotten us? War after war, and we keep fighting. So what if I told you that words possess a power that can never be killed? Ideas will outlive any human being. What if I told you the revolution is a conversation? Hello, welcome back to The Revolution is a Conversation. I'm your host, Jaleesa, and today I have a special guest, Oscar Gonzalez, my cousin.
Hello.
And we have a very special episode for you today. So today we're talking about beyond procreation. And what we mean by that is that sexuality is something beyond procreating now. And I think a good place to begin is to talk about what a person might go through when coming out. So what thoughts would you like to share on that?
Well, I think coming out is a really important part of an LGBTQ individual. It's a special moment. I mean, no matter if you come out when you're 23 years old or if you come out when you're 14 years old, I think it holds a special place in everyone's heart, and it's something that should be taken seriously.
And what would you say would be like some of the challenges somebody goes through?
Well, when coming out, I guess it's really like an unknown. You never know if you're going to be accepted by those you feel you would have been, or maybe those who you thought that would have been there for you as you came out didn't turn out to be there for you.
And then, so you have a story around acceptance, and if you feel comfortable sharing, what would you say was your experience with coming out and your experience with those around you accepting you for who you are?
I feel like overall I had somewhat of a strong support system, even if it didn't come from those who I feel like I would have needed it the most from, like parents or that sort of thing. I was very grateful for the family that did stick by my side, you being one of them, all my other cousins from my mom's side. My sisters have been really accepting, but for some that's not always the case, and some don't have anyone who accepts them at all, and it can really turn into a dark moment in your life.
And so would you say that you went through a dark moment in your coming out?
I would say I did go through somewhat of a dark moment just because my parents weren't as accepting, and those being the people that brought you onto this earth, you would expect them to support you through everything, and not having them support me at the beginning was one of probably the darkest moments of my life, and it honestly confused me as to whether I was making the right decision, and that's not something that you should think twice about.
So when you say that you were confused, do you mean that you were confused around your sexuality, or what was the confusion kind of wrapped around?
I wasn't actually confused about my sexuality. I knew who I was from a very young age. I was actually confused about whether I made the right decision to come out or not, and like I said, you shouldn't be confused about that.
So it sounds like you experienced a little bit of regret around coming out, and what would you say are the specifics around that for you personally?
So I just regretted coming out simply because I didn't feel as accepted as I should have been by both of my parents. And I mean, before I say any of this, I do want to mention that currently they do both accept me and love me, hopefully to the full of their potential. But I did regret coming out simply just because I didn't feel the love.
Did you feel freed? Like, was there a liberating feeling with coming out?
I honestly did feel freed for a while, and then it kind of felt like it was taken back once I realized that my own parents didn't love me.
And where would you say that comes from?
I would definitely say it has to come from how they grew up, and most of all, religion.
And so, do you practice religion now, or how do you think being gay and like following a religion, how do you think those coexist, and do they coexist for you personally?
So this is just personally, a lot of people always say, if you're gay, you're going to hell.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus doesn't love you, all of those kinds of things. And I feel like that's the majority of the religious community. Not saying that everyone who is religious has that point of view, but I would say the majority does, or at least I feel that way.
Because I think religion does really... The one thing that I learned from religion was shame. There's shame in a lot of things, and a lot of religious people want to make it seem like being gay is wrong and shameful. But then it goes so much beyond that, because like even just having sex is shameful and a sin and dirty. And it's just kind of crazy because we all come from sex, and if it wasn't for sex, none of us would be here. But now I think it's so much more beyond that, and beyond just the act of sex. Like, this episode is named Beyond Procreation. So because in being gay, you basically cannot procreate with the same sex, and I think it's just an act of love, and it's something that religion has taught us to feel shame around. And so I'm kind of curious as to how you feel around that subject.
So when I think about sex, I see it more as just an act of love. Of course, there are some people out there that might participate in the activity simply because they crave it, and that's totally fine. I feel like everyone should explore sex. Personally, I like to see sex as an act of love, whether that's between a boy and a boy, a girl and a girl, or a boy and a girl. I feel like the sex sometimes is actually about love, and sometimes others see a boy and a boy together and they just think that's gross, it's disgusting, when really it's just love. And in no way is that harming you. Two individuals loving each other doesn't harm anyone else.
Right, and if you think it's gross, then don't participate in it that way.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't think a boy and a boy should have sex, if you are a boy, then don't have sex with a boy.
Exactly.
But don't judge others for having sex with a boy if they want to, you know?
Mm-hmm. So kind of bringing it back to religion finding same-sex relationships to be sinful, what was that experience like for you with having a religious mother?
So since my mom was so religious, if anything was going wrong in life, the first thing she would say is, like, pray to God. And personally, I don't find myself to be very religious simply because of the fact that some of these religious communities tell me on a daily basis that I will go to hell for loving other men. And in no way am I saying that I don't agree with religion. I think that's an amazing thing, and if anyone is religious, I respect their religion. But I do ask to be respected as an individual.
So a lot of religions also kind of think that if you're gay, you're just confused and that you can be converted to being straight. And what are your thoughts around that?
I don't think I won't say I don't think. It's not possible to be converted. I mean, you're born however you are, whether you're attracted to a man or a woman, whoever that might be. You can't change that.
And then you say in the beginning of your journey in coming out as who you really are, your dad was one of the ones that didn't accept you right away. What was your experience with your father?
So I never actually came out to my dad. My mom told my dad. I had no intentions in telling him that I was gay at the moment, just because I felt like it wasn't the right time. And that's why I say everyone has their time, and coming out shouldn't be something that's taken away. I definitely do think that part of me was taken away, and in a way that kind of backfired on me, not being able to tell him myself. So we were kind of in a rocky stage in our relationship. I didn't get along with my dad that well at that time. So he invited me to dinner, and he had basically explained to me that I would have to join my brother to Mexico to help him through some situations that he was going through, and he would need some support. And, I thought to myself, that's my brother and I should probably go support him. So I did that, and even if my brother and I didn't have the best relationship, I just thought that's what family would do for each other. But it turned out to be completely different.
And so what did it end up being once you got there? What was your experience?
So once we arrived, it seemed pretty normal. We arrived at my aunt's house. My dad had said that he had to go back to Reno for something work related, and I bought it. And so we attended our first therapy session, and the questions seemed legit. She was asking me about my brother, what my relationship was with him, and I seemed to believe it all. I would say probably around like the third session, the questions began to change, and they almost geared towards me and not my brother anymore. She would ask me about my sexuality, how I was feeling mentally, and I knew something wasn't right.
And so what did it end up being?
After being there for a while, I told my dad that I didn't want to attend the therapy sessions anymore, and he then explained to me that I had to, and that I basically had no choice. He explained to me that I was confused and that I needed therapy to rethink my decisions.
So in a way, he was basically trying to convert you, or to kind of make you feel like this isn't really who you are, right?
Yeah, and the worst part about it was I was put on medication. The therapist said that they needed to prescribe medication, and so they took us to this one lab. We got prescribed, and I started taking these pills. I had no idea. They told me I had high cholesterol. From what I'm aware of, young kids don't have high cholesterol.
So basically they were treating your sexuality like a sickness, right?
Essentially.
And how do you think that affected your journey? How do you feel about it now? How did you feel about it then?
I definitely think that had a huge impact. I felt very confused at that time. Again, not about my sexuality, but just about whether I made the right decision. And it got to the point where I was debating whether I should even still be here.
And thank you for sharing that. I think that that's something very real. It's something people go through when coming out, and not a lot of us are aware of the traumas that some of the people in the LGBTQ community go through when coming out. And so I'm kind of wondering, where else, what happened after the medication? And
so at the time, I didn't think nothing of the medication. I was young, and I said, well, if they say I have high cholesterol, I have high cholesterol. So I was taking the medication for a while, and Within that time, I kind of also found my passion for art. I bought canvases and paint and was just painting on my free time. A lot of it consisted in the house that I was locked in. I wasn't really able to leave the house by myself. So I spent my time there, and I tried to just ease my mind by painting. I didn't mention, before this, I kind of had communication with my family over here. I mean, I had my phone and I was connected to the Wi-Fi. So once I found out that I was there for therapy, my first thought was to reach out to someone who was here. So I told my sister, I told her I'm here for being gay and I didn't want to be here. And she said she would talk to my mom. And that's when my mom started realizing that what was happening wasn't okay. But my dad somehow seemed to convince her that it's what was best for me, which I didn't really believe. So, I mean, I could have lost my phone, but I don't think I lost my phone. I'm sure someone took it knowing that I was calling my sister, just because it became a thing over here with my family. So I lost my phone. We'll just say that. I won't accuse them of stealing it just because I can't prove it. But from there, I started using their house phone to try and call over here. It took me a while to figure it out, but I did try everything, and that's when they stopped allowing me to use the house phone. And so in Mexico, the rooms, I guess, the doors kind of lock with metal. It's not like a wooden door, your traditional door where you can lock it from like just the inside. You can lock those doors inside and out. And I'm sure a lot of people might know that if they are from Mexico. So the outside door was locked, so I couldn't really go outside.
So you were locked inside your room?
I was locked inside my room. And then they locked the door in the room that I was staying in at one point because I was misbehaving, quote unquote. And they unlocked the outside door. And one day at dinner, we were eating, and I was just telling them that I wasn't happy there, and they knew I wasn't. So at this point, it wasn't about showing fake love to get me through the therapy just because they knew I wasn't going to attend it. So one of the days, my aunt was just joking around and said, well, if you're so miserable, why don't you jump off the roof? And so the room I was staying in, the door that leads outside, so it's on the second story. But apart from that, she didn't tell me jump off the second story because that's just a balcony. There's a stairway up to the third floor, and that's the top of the roof. It's super high. And that's basically, I guess, what she wanted. She told me to jump off the roof. And I knew that that wasn't the way out, and I knew that I just had to pull through, sort of. So most of the time there just consisted of me just passing time, trying to keep myself busy.
And how do you think that culture and your ethnicity kind of plays in with this experience and the comments from your aunt?
Well, I think in Mexico, being gay is not a good thing. I mean, even if you compare it with how being gay is here, it's totally different. You can be gay, you can be a drag queen here, and you are praised. Yes, God. I mean, if you're a drag queen, they're like, work. Over there, the drag queens are killed every night. If you're out in drag and someone doesn't like it, they will shoot you and they will leave, and the police in Mexico don't care. So even then, I just felt like I was in such a bad environment just being in Mexico. I couldn't go to the police and say, hey, they took me because I'm gay. I couldn't do anything. They wouldn't care. So I kind of just waited it out, and
Oh man, so you were like trapped.
Yeah, it was
trying to find a way out.
There was a moment where I was basically plotting my escape. Like I said, I don't care if this is my aunt. I will take her money and I will get on a train to the border. Something. I was going to plead to be brought back. But thankfully, around came the time. So also this was in October. So I missed out on Halloween with my family that year. Thanksgiving came around and I asked my dad if I could at least come back for Thanksgiving, and he said no. So I had to spend the Thanksgiving by myself here, or not here, well, in Mexico. Mm-hmm. And then came Christmas. So my family always gets together in our hometown, except this time they wanted to do something different and go to cabins. So I was brought along, of course, because my whole family, my dad's side of the family was going, and we went to these cabins, and I wasn't welcome to anyone's party but probably just my one cousin, and I'm so grateful for her because she probably was like my only rock there at those cabins. To this day, she still messages me and tells me she misses me because I have not been to Mexico since. But yeah, so we were at the cabins, and I guess
this gathering at the cabins was in Mexico.
Yes, it's in Mexico, this small little town. There's nowhere for me to go. I have no idea where I'm at. I'm in the middle of the woods. So we were there, days go by, and so during one of our activities, I guess, the parents were all together and I was kind of like secluded doing my own thing, and I was with my cousin, my rock, mm-hmm. and my other cousins from one of my other aunts, they just started yelling horrible things like maricón, ni marifloras, like basically telling me I'm not a part of the family, that I'm gay. And I guess I kind of brought that upon myself just because I snitched them out. I mean, if they all hated me, why couldn't I get them back? So I guess they were mad at me and they just kept going on about...
What did you snitch them out for?
They were drinking alcohol and they were under the age. I was 14 at the time. I said,
it was war.
No. Yeah, I was like, heck no, you are not going to drink alcohol here with the parents not knowing. So I told on them. Of course, they didn't care. Instead, they just looked at me and asked me why I was snitching. Like, snitching wasn't the thing to do, but I'm gay, so I did it. But yeah, no, so they started yelling at me, and in the middle of that, and he started yelling at my cousin who was also like behind me. So it just started getting super aggressive, and that's when my dad unexpectedly came in and he heard everything, and that was the first time that I could see something like some kind of change in my dad, because for once he defended me, mm-hmm. and told him to back off. And that same day we left and we stayed in the house we were staying that my dad owns in Mexico. And we stayed there probably for 4 more days, and as soon as I knew it, I was on my way back to Reno, and it was one of the most horrifying experiences of my life. I thought that's where my life was going to end, and now being here, I did have a little more struggles with my dad once I returned, just because I found out what he did, and now I had a chance to run away, so I left my dad and probably didn't talk to him for 2 years. And then he kind of reached out, and this time I knew it was genuine because he didn't ask me to go to Mexico. And now we're at, I think, a good place where he's more understanding now. But it is something that people go through and no one knows about it.
And so it was like a total of 3 months?
Yeah, it was 3 months in Mexico.
And what is like your biggest takeaway from that experience?
To not give in is what I would say. I think you shouldn't give in and instead show them up.
Stay true to yourself.
Yeah, and show them up. That's what I'm doing at this moment, and I find myself to be pretty successful so far, and I'm going to continue that success, and I'd like to show them one day.
And that's so important, and I want to thank you for sharing your story. I think it's something a lot of us don't realize that comes with coming out. When you're straight, it's like you kind of have it easy, and I think a lot of us don't realize the bravery it takes to be yourself when you're not straight.
Yeah, and I think even though it is becoming more like an accepting generation, like even to this day, it's sometimes just taken as a joke. With TikTok being such a big thing nowadays, sometimes that app can be vile, and people on there are just sometimes just plain out like just disgusting. And some of these boys on TikTok thought it would be a funny trend to come out as gay or bisexual on April Fools, and that wasn't okay. And a lot of people saw that, which I think was an amazing thing. Like big influencers spoke out about the whole situation, and that's just something that I would want to bring awareness to, is coming out isn't a joke, and people take their lives because of it.
Right. And so since you mentioned that, I think this is a good time to share a suicide hotline, because this is something very real that a lot of people go through. And we just want to make you aware that there is help, and the National Suicide Prevention Line is 1-800-273-8255. And we just want to encourage anybody going through struggles like this to reach out and find help. And so before we wrap up this episode, I just kind of want to ask you, do you feel like the LGBTQ community is in good standing, and do you think that your community is safe?
I think the community has achieved a lot, but I do think there's always something that can be done. I mean, anywhere you go, it's not a perfect world, and day by day we're changing, and I guess that's a good thing, but change needs to happen faster.
And so how do you think that someone like me can support your community and kind of be an ally?
I guess just be an ally and influence. I mean, influencing your friends, someone who might have seen the same point of view as you, kind of just make people understand, that we're not all bad people.
That you're not so different.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and for being so brave and spreading awareness and being the first guest on this podcast.
No problem. My pleasure.
And so as always, I'd love to encourage you all to leave me a voicemail if you have a personal story you'd like to share, or any comments around this subject or any subject in previous episodes. Please leave me a voicemail, 775-525-1193. And if you'd like to support me and this podcast, please visit patreon.com/therevolutionIsAconversation. I'll talk to you guys soon.